Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Saddleback webinar. My name is Liz Mangus, Literacy Specialist with Saddleback Educational Publishing, and we have a great session for you today. If you are a teacher of English learners, or really if you're a teacher just in general, and you're struggling with technology issues or lack of technology, we're going to have some great information to share with you today. We'll get started right at 3 o'clock Eastern Time with our content, but just a few reminders before we get started. If you're new here, you have a control bar. It is at the bottom of your web browser window, and you have a couple of options for interacting with us today. You have your chat feature, your chat icon, which is where you can communicate with your fellow attendees. Just make sure that if you want all of your fellow attendees to see your comment, then make sure you choose all panelists and attendees in the drop-down menu before you hit send. That way you can make sure that everybody is receiving your chat. The chat area is also where we will be dropping links to handouts, resources, certificate of attendance, all of that good stuff today. You'll find links in the chat area for that. Now you also have access to the Q&A area, and this is where if you have questions for Saddleback or if you have questions for our presenter today, please make sure to put them in the Q&A area so that way we'll be able to sort through them and get answers to your questions a little bit more efficiently. Along with that, we always love it if you follow us on social media, especially if you're on Twitter. I know many of you are on Twitter, so take this moment to please follow us if you don't already. And I know many of you are already big fans of our presenter today, Dr. Michelle Yzquierdo. But if she is new to you, this is her Twitter handle right here. Make sure you go ahead and give her a follow. Shout us out, let everybody know that you're joining us today for this great learning opportunity. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. So while we're waiting, why don't you go ahead to the chat area, let us know where you're joining us from and how your school year is going so far. And while we're waiting for those responses to populate, let's check in with Michelle. How are you doing?
I'm good. I said I wasn't going to look at the chat because I'm terrible at multitasking, but I'm totally looking at the chat, and I'm excited to see where all of these people are joining us from. How exciting.
Yeah, we have, we have a little behind the scenes contest going on. Who is the furthest away? So Michelle and I are both in Texas. So if you are very far from Texas, if you think you're the furthest away from Texas, go ahead and let us know in the chat where you're from, because we want to see. We were thinking maybe some of our, oh, Canada. See, I told you Canada. It might be our Canadian friends.
Love it.
Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh,
All
hi,
right.
Carrie, my friend Carrie. Oh, it's nice to see some friends and colleagues coming in today. Lots of Texas people.
Oh, Nancy Motley from Houston. Hi.
What's up, Nancy Motley?
India. We've got India in the house. India, I think you may win. I'm not sure. Nova Scotia, that's pretty far away, but not as far away as India. Irene in Nova Scotia says her year has been interesting. No doubt. Hello from Ukraine. Hello.
What? I love hello, fellow low techies, right?
That's awesome. So just a quick note before we get started. How's the school year going? Like, let's give it a scale of 1 to 5. 5 being, it's awesome, better than I thought. 1 being, ooh, I already need a do-over. Just drop a number in the chat. 4.5, that's excellent.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love it. I see a 5. Justine says 5, better than she thought.
A 0 is it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Oh, can I say
Okay, so we definitely have a range. People having oh boy, Nancy. -5, Jennifer, oh no. Oh boy, we're gonna have to hit rewind for Jennifer and give her a do-over in the school year. My goodness.
Ohio, I love it. I really just want to sit here for an hour and read the comments where everybody's from and the teacher jokes, right? Can we do that?
Well, I would love to do that, but then people might be disappointed because they need tips for low tech. It is 3 o'clock Eastern time. That means it is time for us to officially launch. So as you know, we are here to talk about low tech situations, no tech situation, technical difficulties, situations, and how do you maintain that connection and that instruction with students who are remote and have limited technology. And to discuss this issue with us today, we have Dr. Michelle Yzquierdo from Silence Education joining us. And if you're not familiar with her, I'm going to give a little brief bio. And then I will turn everything over to her so she can go ahead and get right into it for us. So Michelle is a very popular and sought after trainer and presenter, which I could tell from Twitter that that was the case because a lot of people were pumped that you were coming on to talk with us today. So she has presented at the local, state, and national level on a variety of topics, including best practices for English learners, implementation of effective new arrival centers, factors contributing to the success of newcomer immigrant English learners, as well as numerous trainings addressing state and federal accountability and compliance concerns. Her experience includes high school science teacher on the new arrival team, where she taught students from all demographic groups, including first-year immigrant English learners. She has held a variety of other positions, including science department chair, sheltered instruction peer facilitator, district ESL instructional specialist, and educational program specialist. Many of you already know she's the author of the book Pathways to Greatness for ELL Newcomers, a comprehensive guide for schools and teachers. Here it is. If you teach newcomers, this is the book that you need. Go ahead and get it. It was released in December of 2017. It's a fantastic resource, and we are thrilled that you are joining us. Thank you so very much. I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll come back. I'll hop back on as needed to get questions answered and that sort of thing. So, thanks again, Michelle.
Thank you for that super embarrassing introduction.
Sorry.
That's okay. So hi guys, I'm so excited to be here with y'all, and thank you for taking time out of your day to come talk about this topic. I think it's a really important topic, and the reason I'm presenting on this today is discussing this topic came very organically when I was speaking to friends and colleagues, and my sister-in-law who's got my niece and nephew at home, and they're doing homeschool, or they're doing remote learning, and I kept coming back to the same question. And I even talking to my non-educator husband about it, like, I wonder what they're doing for kids who don't have the latest and greatest technology. Like, what does that look like for them? And just sort of started collecting ideas and resources, because as an advocate for English learners, I thought, well, a lot of our beautiful English learners are probably those same kids that don't have the access to the bells and whistles and all of the things that teachers are using now. Also, when the world shut down and the pandemic started, everything came out. There was all these free webinars and all of these resources and all this ed tech things that you could use, but nobody was really saying, okay, wait a second, what about these kids who were not going to be able to access all of those fabulous ed tech tools because of lack of technology? So that's sort of how this presentation came about. Now, listen, y'all, I'm probably going to leave here. We're going to leave here with more questions and answers. What my goal was today was to kind of just take everything that I've been reading and researching and talking about and putting it in a presentation for you. So hopefully you get some great ideas, or it's a springboard at least to further discussion to what we can do to better support kiddos that don't have access. So low tech, no problem. And here we go. So of course, I'm going to model our fabulous content and language objectives, because these are super crucial no matter what types of kids or what we're teaching. So what we're going to do in the next few minutes is we're going to explore some ways to effectively support learners who have that limited technology during remote learning. And I'd like to, if we could, just really quick, and Liz, if you want to maybe read a couple of them, or we can look at it later. What do you hope to get out of today? Why are you joining me? Do you want to get specific strategies? Do you want ideas? So today I hope to get an idea about, think about that for me for just a second. Thinker's chin. And if you can, just maybe type a couple of responses in the chat. Today I hope to get an idea about, or today I hope to learn how to what? So what are some things that we hope we can learn about today? And I'm going to give you just 1 second to answer those. And I might open up the chat just to read. Engage it.
Yeah, I see engage reluctant readers, alternative resources for staff, adult learners.
Oh yeah, adult learners. Absolutely, that's important. So I keep
A
seeing
lot of engagement. Yeah.
engage. That's a very, I'm actually really glad. That was either going to really backfire or go really great, because actually one of the pieces I'm going to talk about today is that really authentic engagement piece that I think is so crucial. Okay, so with that being said, let's talk about just this vocabulary word, or our word of the day is the digital divide. And it's essentially this gap that exists between individuals, or in our case, our beautiful students, who have access to all of this modern technology and communication tools versus those who lack the access. And, you know, one of the things we need to think about is when COVID-19 caused the shutdown, there was this really harsh lights shined on this digital divide. We're talking like, you know, the dressing room lights at Target when you're trying on a bathing suit, harsh lights, right? The difference between the has and the have-nots, and just the inequality that existed when we relied solely on these digital tools to meet the needs of our kids. So what I want to suggest to you today is some alternatives. So I'm certainly not saying we're going to throw out all of our technology, but I think we need to think about differentiating our delivery of our lessons, just like we would in a classroom, but through the lens of whether or not our kids can access that tech. So that's kind of what we're going to go for today. So here's the researcher in me. I have to establish the problem, right, before we talk about solutions. So a couple of pieces that we need to discuss first is, first of all, the unequal access to technology tools. So the actual hardware, the actual connection to the internet. And I thought these statistics were quite startling. 19 million Americans. By the way, let me say this now. The last two slides of my PowerPoint have all of the resources that I'm using and that I'm quoting from. So I'm going to mention a lot of resources today, and you can absolutely access those at the end of the two slides. And I've even categorized the resources for you so that they're easy to follow and they match sort of the order of the slides. So 6% of the population don't have broadband service at threshold speeds. And I looked up what threshold speeds were, and it's the absolute, the gold standard for how fast internet needs to be absolutely even usable. And that essentially equates to 9 million children that live in homes with no internet. So that's a lot of kids, right? 14% of our school-age children. And what are those kiddos doing when they can't get on your Zoom meeting or Google Meets or any of those other things? And this is just a graph, and you can already tell, I know that's a little bit difficult to see, but you can already tell that this digital divide is clearly separating the haves and the have-nots in terms of race. So our white children, our Asian American kids have higher access to internet with Hispanic and African American students, and you can see the divide there. And then also, why, I thought this was interesting too, why we don't have internet in our homes. And it, according to this study, and again, it's cited at the end of my PowerPoint here, 34%, or most families said that they just simply didn't need internet. And by the way, this was from 2018, so I do want to say that many of these families, if that was the case, probably went ahead and got internet when it was necessary for their children to learn, or for them to learn or do remote work. So 34% were unable to afford it, 4% had no computer, and 4% absolutely had no option for internet. So if you're doing the math, that's 42% of these people without internet. It's just not even an option for them, either because they can't afford it or it's just not there. And I thought that was really interesting, because even if I have the technology, I can't access it with the internet. And then speaking of that technology, what about laptops? What about iPads or any other way that they can actually get on the internet? So these are our beautiful children with limited or no access to computers, and it's 11 million kids. That's a lot of babies that can't participate equitably in our school if that's what we're relying on. A couple more charts here that you can clearly see. The divide is also furthered by income. So income levels is a huge piece there. And then here's just another visual to show you by race how these kids are doing in terms of access to technology. So there's a couple of other challenges that I wanted to talk about, and I think it warrants a conversation, because oftentimes we think of, do they have the technology or do they not? And there's a lot of real estate in there that we can talk about between completely no technology versus all the fancy bells and whistles. So what about a family who has access to technology? Okay, so a family that has internet and a family that has a laptop or has a desktop computer. What if there are multiple children in that family who have to attend online classes? What if, in my situation, a parent at home who's also also working online. Or again, I'm thinking about my sister-in-law here, who sister-in-law and brother-in-law are both working from home, and they have 2 children. So that's essentially 4 different devices that a family would need to have to support the learning of the children. And then other things like access to a quiet place to work. That's hard for me, right? With a husband and 2 small children running around, that's often a challenge, is just having that time or that space carved out during the day where I can have some quiet time to work. And then another really important population of students that are overlooked, or I think maybe not necessarily overlooked, that was probably the wrong choice of words, but just another population of students that we really, really need to be thinking about as we think about how to close the technology divide is our homeless children or our transient kids who don't have a permanent place to live. All of these are concerns if we don't have alternative ways to deliver our lessons. So with that being said, remote learning doesn't always have to be digital learning. And I didn't cite this particular resource, but I thought it was interesting because it made me go, oh, you know what? You're absolutely right about that. They said, remote learning is not a new thing. We've been doing like correspondence classes for a really long time, like back in the day when you could mail off and get like a correspondence class like mailed to you. So again, remote learning doesn't always have to be digital. So that's kind of my goal, is to give you some alternatives. But before we talk about alternatives, I want to briefly mention overarching best practices. Let's go back to what we know, and let's go back to what we're good at. So thinking about your classroom, back in the old days when we could actually be around each other and, like I was telling Liz, actually wear lipstick, right? Nobody wears lipstick anymore because we have a mask on. But back in the old days, what are some things that you did in your class that worked? What are some really, those lessons where at the end of the day you go, man, I'm really good at this teaching job. What about those lessons? Can you take those lessons and think about what they would look like if a child's at home working on it without the computer, without the laptop, just at home in their living room with their parents or with their adults that they live with, working on this particular activity or lesson? So overarching best practices that I'm sort of using as a lens as I talk to you today are, we have to connect with students and we have to provide authentic, engaging activities, regardless if they're sitting in front of a little blue light and a camera. So I want you to be thinking about those 2 as we kind of go through the rest of our time together. Again, connecting with our kiddos and providing those authentic opportunities. So here's a visual that I want to work through with you really quick. So at the top, we have our children who have access to tech, the laptop, the iPad, the internet, they have all of it. And at the bottom of my little inverted triangle here is no access. But I think there's 2 different pieces we need to think about. One on the left is the physical access. Do I have the laptop or do I not? And the other one on the other side would be the children that I mentioned that maybe are sharing devices. Or what about the kiddos who spend the day with grandma and grandpa? At home, they have access to a desktop computer and internet, but during the day, they don't. So maybe it's not necessarily the actual device that's the limiting factor, but rather when they can get on and get that technology. And I think that's a really important consideration, because that begs the question of how flexible are we being with when our kids can access technology. So I think these 2 pieces together really are great to talk about when we think about what our lessons could possibly look like. So I'm going to add one more, and that's based on this thing on the right, this time limitation, or time is a limiting factor. And that means we just got to be flexible. We have to be, I know teachers in general are super flexible, but I think we have to be even more flexible and really think out of the box and get super creative when we're coming up with lessons for kids. So connecting with kids, this is just, 101, whether you're remote, whether you're face-to-face, or whether you've got some kids doing both, this idea that we want to connect with kids. And if you're already thinking, well, but Michelle, what is that going to look like? I'm going to give you some specific ideas towards the end, but I just kind of wanted to go through what are these best practices for connecting with kids. And, as teachers, we know we have to listen, or as adults, just in general, we have to listen to kids, like really listen to individual students and really make an effort to connect with individual students. Try to learn something about individual students, or you might discover a common interest or a shared experience that you can use to grow that relationship with that child. And it's that old adage we've been hearing about since we were baby teachers, that babies don't care what we know until they know that we care, right? So I think that's even more important. And I'm going to quote my lovely friend and colleague, Carol Salva, that many of you know, but we've had multiple conversations and we keep talking about, sometimes we get so overwhelmed with, are they getting the content? Are they getting the content? And what Carol made a good point. She's like, that's always been a concern for us, right? But I think more so now than ever, we need to make sure we're connecting with kiddos because we need to keep them. We need to keep them in the game, especially those older kids who have a choice whether or not they want to keep up with school anyway. So I think this idea of listening and making that connection is super important. Asking open-ended questions, and why is that important for connecting with students? Because if you think about asking open-ended questions, again, I'm going to address how we might do this if we don't have technology. During each lesson and throughout the day, it really helps students build those connections that they need to build with the content. And it also, again, could help you establish common interest and a common experience with kids as they answer these questions and contemplate the answers to these questions. And then talk to kids. Not necessarily like on Zoom, but talk to kids. So one of the things I'm going to propose are alternative ways that we can talk with kids, that we can check in with individual students. 1 or 2 kids a day, make that your goal, to really talk to individual kids and listen, back to bullet number 1, what their responses are. So I really like this, and this is one of the first citations you'll see at the bottom here. This is Jennifer Gonzalez with Dave Stewart, and this was a Cult of Pedagogy podcast. I actually found the blog post that summarized the podcast, and this reference will be at the end, but I love this idea of moments of genuine connection. So here's your acronym for the day, right? MGCs. So what makes an MGC, a moment of genuine connection? Well, Mr. Stewart, Dave said it's a brief moment, so no more than 3 minutes, so it's brief, and it's genuine. And what does it mean by genuine? And this, I'm gonna be real with y'all here. You know, as a former high school teacher, I really made an effort to connect with kids, and gosh darn it, there was just some kids that were really difficult to connect with. So I really appreciate when he says genuine means exactly what it says. It means you have to do, as an adult, you might have to do some inside work and some self-examination when negative feelings about a kid creep up, right? So make that concerted effort to make a genuine connection with kids, even if it means you got to do some self-reflection and maybe talk yourself off a cliff if you have a child that you're not necessarily getting along with or seeing eye to eye with. And then what does a connection mean? It means you're seeking the child out and you want that child to feel valued, known, and respected. And again, if you're but Michelle, how do we do this? I'm going to give you some suggestions and some really concrete ideas that I've kind of collected for you. So also moments of genuine connection, they're embedded in what you're already doing. So it's inside the work you're already doing. So it can take place before the lesson, during the lesson, after the lesson, anytime during the day. And I like this idea of tracking your connections. I know it might seem a little bit contrived to track your connections, but I think it's really important to kind of keep track because we have biases, which is a whole nother webinar for another day, but our biases will mean we're going to be sort of attracted to, if you will, to connecting with certain kids, where if we keep track of our connections on a actual roster or a clipboard. And I love Mr. Stewart when he says he doesn't allow himself to move on to a new checklist until he's connected, or at least made a connection or attempted a connection with all of his kiddos. So what does that look like? Well, something else to consider is some offline or low-tech methods of communication. So here's some ideas. And again, just like any other toolbox, when we're creating a toolbox for teaching, not all of these ideas are going to be appropriate for all of your kids. You might actually also use some of these low-tech ideas for the kid who can get on Zoom every day, but maybe he needs a little bit of extra love for you. So what about a personal video? Just a quick few seconds. Hello, Jorge, I'm checking in on you. I was thinking about you today. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Like literally 15 seconds. And what's cool about that is those can be text to children. They can be texted to a child. And so even if they don't have Wi-Fi, if they have access to a cell phone, they absolutely can get these videos from you. Or how about just a text message? I mean, just an actual quick little text message, thinking about you, wondering how you're doing. Shoot me back a text and let me know how life is going. And so some of these apps you might already be familiar with, but in case you are a low techie and you're coming to this session to get some ideas, I love these 3 apps. They all have pros and cons. The Say Hi app is wonderful because it translates your message. Lots of districts I work with are using that app. There's another one called Talking Point and the Remind app. So as teachers, you might already be familiar with all of these. I like them because many of them you can send messages to entire groups of students, but more importantly, for the purposes of connecting with the kiddo, you can send individual messages, individual short videos. And then, you know, an old school phone call where you actually pick up the phone and dial it, and you make words come out of your mouth and somebody makes words come out of their mouth, and you actually can talk to a family or to a student. And you can even tell kids ahead of time, hey, I might call you, and you know, just talk for a few minutes if you're available. So definitely give a kid a heads up if that's a concern of yours. And then I really like this idea of office hours, right? So maybe besides your 1:15 to 3 or 2, whatever, how much time you're on camera with your kiddos, could you possibly have office hours, maybe even after hours, for that kiddo who really doesn't have that quiet place to work, or really can't get onto technology, or maybe he doesn't have parents at home during the day to support him with learning? So maybe at night when mom or dad or aunt or uncle or grandma or grandpa come home, now they're working through homework, but now there's some questions. So these office hours where kids can call you, they can text you, or they can email you, and they'll know that within that block of time, you're going to be available to answer that call or that email or that text. So I love this idea of office hours that are standard and that your kids can know about. You know what's also really cool about this? If it's a concern that you don't have at the time, because Lord knows the last thing most of us have is extra time, maybe you could even split the difference and share office hours with some of your colleagues. So maybe I'm available on Tuesday nights from 7 to 9, but not just my kids can reach out to me, but Mr. Jones's kids can reach out to me, Mrs. Motley's kids can reach out to me, Mrs. Potter's kids can reach out to me. So maybe as a team or a grade level, y'all can just establish office hours that the rest of your students can use as well. So just a suggestion. So also with authentic learning experiences, I love this, and this came from, I'm sure most of you who are listening to me know Mr. Tan Nguyen and Andrea, I'm going to say your name right, Honigsfeld, and they did a great podcast. And again, this came from the blog that was a summary of the podcast. And she talked about an authentic learning experience of her two children related to music. And it's a really great description of what an authentic learning experience could look like. So she said for her elementary kiddo for music, now I kind of had a little like, whoa, that would be interesting. The kids had to create their own drums with random objects they had in the house. So definitely get your Tylenol or your Advil out for that one, because my 5-year-old would love to just go through the cabinets and find things to bang on, right? And then her high school kiddo also had a music lesson, and he had to interview family members about their first musical experience and analyze that relationship. So I don't know, maybe, you know, your first concert you went to. So just these, I can see these, especially that second one, being an activity I would have done in a regular class. Like, okay, so go interview your parents. So again, I want to go back to what were you already doing in class that was a really good lesson, and what might that look like now with remote learning? You don't have to have it necessarily in front of a camera. And things like student choice. So I love the idea of choice boards. Ton talked about why these particular two lessons were authentic, and he mentioned student choice. So kids had a choice and had some options. It also led to some creativity. And I think that's really important. When kids can choose and when they can create, those are when those lessons become really authentic, and they're engaged because they've had some buy-in in the selection process of what they're doing. Both of these lessons also use resources available to students. So again, think outside the box. What are some things kids might have around their home that can become part of the lesson that they can use, and these low-tech opportunities for creativity. And I also love the idea that that interview with family members, engaging the family. So if you can engage the family, I would love to help my child out if there was a lesson that involved him interviewing us or something we could do as a family. And then of course that problem solving experience. Okay, what can I use to make drums in my kitchen or my bathroom? So let's talk briefly about being flexible. And I already mentioned this with the music lessons, but offer multiple means of engagement. This is where I want to talk about low-tech options. So yes, we have our Zoom class, and we could expect our kids to engage with us on camera. Whether or not cameras are turned on, that's another webinar for a whole other day. I have a lot of research about that. If you're interested, shoot me an email and I'll share it with you. can students also just call in? So maybe they have that cell phone, they can just call in and you can engage audio, or maybe through polls. So I can't see you, but I know you're there because you are answering my polls, or you're in the chat. And I love the idea of collaborative documents. So Google Docs, Padlet, something kids can visit later. So maybe we don't measure engagement. Here's just a suggestion. Maybe we don't measure engagement for that 45 minutes when the Zoom camera's on, but maybe as a whole, did you complete the task throughout the week? Did you reply? You know, especially our older kids, maybe they're working. Maybe I can't get on and I can't do my work until 11 o'clock at night. And when I do, it's going to be on my cell phone. So I can get on the Padlet at 11:30 at night, but it's going to be on my cell phone. So just thinking about that flexibility with our kiddos. And then how are we, I guess the question is, how are we allowing for participation by our students with those limited technologies or with alternative times? So I think that the most important thing we think about is, how are we being flexible with alternative times? So some other ideas, back to recording a short video of you. I love the idea of, what if you just chunked your lessons? Now these are going to have to be really short videos because you can't text a really lengthy video, but chunking your lesson. Maybe it's a quick little explanation of a task. Maybe it's just you reading some text. These videos can be uploaded. They can be sent to kids via text. They can be sent to kids via email, things they can access on their smartphones. You know, I don't know what your policies are recording Zoom lessons, but if you could do that so kids can look at this later. So again, this is this time flexibility. So I can't get on, yes, I have a laptop and yes, I have internet, but I can't get on and I can't watch these videos until at night when my brother and sister are asleep, or when my mom and dad are home. So whatever that looks like. Also, guys, old school, like pick up your phone and record an audio MP3 file of you explaining a task. Maybe it's you reading an excerpt from a text. Maybe it's you posing some questions just so the kids can hear your voice. Maybe you're doing a think aloud as you're working out a problem and you're doing a thinking aloud. Things that kids can just listen to. And I like this idea because even if a kid doesn't have access to a smartphone, MP3 players, super cheap now, where you can record your voice. Those can be mailed to a kid, or a parent or a student can come pick those up. And then really all they need is a set of headphones to listen. And I think some of these ideas are also really valuable if we do go back, when we do go back face to face. If you have newcomers and English learners, these are all great accommodations to make content comprehensible even at that point. And then, as I mentioned earlier with office hours, alternative time to Zoom, if that's an issue. And again, not all of these are going to work for everybody, but maybe one day a week, almost like tutoring hours, right? Like, so when I was a classroom teacher, I had tutoring hours or office hours where kiddos could come and hang out with me after school and do extra work. Maybe you could have a Zoom sort of tutoring time where if a kid can't join you during your actual time allotted Zoom class, maybe in an early evening, maybe even on a Saturday afternoon. I know you're like, what? I'm not going to work on a Saturday, but that's the idea of maybe talking to your colleagues. So you can pick times as a team where other students, other teacher students can join you for these alternative times. So something to contemplate. And then I love the idea, what can be done via a cell phone? And that brings me to my colleague, Carol Salva. She did a podcast with Michelle Shorey and Drew Courtney, and it's one of my favorites. It just came out recently. They talked about their summer school plan this past summer. Now, hang on to your hats, boys and girls. They tested their entire summer school curriculum on a I can't remember, she said 3 or 4-year-old cell phone, to make sure that anything they were asking these kiddos to do via Zoom, Google Meets, could also be done on a cell phone if it came down to it. So you got to be thinking, can they complete a paper and pencil assignment and take a picture of it and send it to you? Can you do something like a photo scavenger hunt where they find things and they send it to you? So I love this idea of, because a lot of parents and a lot of families don't have internet, and computers do have cell phone, at least cell phone access that they can use those on. And again, these talking points and remind me apps to connect with individual students, individual families, or your whole class. They mentioned, Michelle Shore and Drew Courtney mentioned how important, when Carol asked them what was your most important lesson that you learned, they both said this idea of communication, that it has to be the forefront, that you have to check in with kids. So especially the kids who don't have that technology, they're not joining you via Zoom every day, check in with those kids, keep those lines of communication open. And then again, the idea of flexibility. They both said how flexible they were and how important flexibility was. Are the kids completing their assignments? Maybe they need that extra time. They need that variation when they can complete assignments, but are they getting done? Are they checking in with you? Are they connecting with you? So thinking about whether or not kids are participating, I think we might need to change our definition of participation a little bit and really see the world and life through the lens of some of these kiddos who have limited technology, and maybe find other ways to measure that, that idea of participation. And, you know, I got to say, again, beyond the scope of this webinar, just because a student is on camera doesn't mean they're participating. So I think maybe redefining what that might look like, just something to ponder. Something to ponder, y'all. So other ideas, Steve Anderson, this is a link at the end of my training. Reading, you know, reading's old school. You don't need a computer to read. You don't need a computer to write and reflect. And there's so many resources out there, how to make that structured, even in an asynchronous or low-tech environment. And I'm not just saying this because you're listening to Nancy Motley, but if you're familiar with Talk, Read, Talk, Write, many of those strategies in that resource can very much help you meet the needs of kids in a low-tech, asynchronous situation. I love the idea of a living history project. Many of my ESL colleagues do something like a living history project, and you can actually Google living history project and get some ideas. That is absolutely outstanding activity or lesson to do, where kids don't need a lot of technology. They need their mouths and their ears and some family members to interview, and it's wonderful what you can do. Check this out. What if they learn to code? And I know you're thinking, what? Learn to code? Check out code.org. I know I'm a super science geek, but code.org has a lot of great activities for kids. Some that you need to use access a computer for, but many can be printed so kids can learn to code. So that's a very, I know you think coding is very technology, relies on technology, but I think it's absolutely worth your time to check out that website and see what they have in there. And then I had to look this up, become a maker. I was like, what's a maker? So I Googled it, right? The Google machine. And there's makerspace.com. It's this whole idea of creative space, I guess very similar to like the drum activity where kids find drums or make drums with things in their household. So just this idea of using what kids have around them to generate objects and explore. Makerspace.com, this whole movement of maker education, it's problem-based, it's project-based learning, it's creativity. So definitely things kids can do without lots of technology in their home. Now, these are just some other random ideas I found, but they sound super fun. And the first one is English class in a jar. And, you know, there are mixed feelings about teacher pay teacher. I personally love it. I think it's like any other resource out there. It's up to you as an individual teacher to decide what lessons are appropriate for you and your beautiful children. But I love this English class in a jar. And I Googled science class in a jar and math class in a jar and history class in a jar to see basically what it is. It's a choice board, and you can make it fun by, you know, cutting them up and putting them in a jar, but sometimes kids will just want to pick them off this sheet here. But some of the activity she has in this is roll a dice poetry, where you roll a dice, and depending on what number you get is the number of lines your poem has, the number of words per line. There's another activity on this called Deep Dive with a TED Talk, where they can view a TED Talk on their phone, on their computer. There's a short story, there's word games. So definitely Google this and you'll find this resource. Now, y'all, this is my favorite, and I don't know how this is going to work, but it's called the Flat Teacher Project. I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's all of these teachers all over the country, all over the world, who are printing out their flat emoji, like Flat Stanley, and mailing it to their kids, along with these choice boards of things that the student can do with Flat Teacher and take a picture. So I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe I'm going to do a flat educational consultant. So maybe send me your address and I'm going to send you the flat version of me, and you can like take a picture of me as you're out exploring or as you're zooming with your class. So yeah, they're printing and they're laminating and they're mailing their Bitmoji selves out, and they're including some suggested activities. And these are very low tech things that kids can, you know, take a picture of me and you reading together, take a picture of me and you outside, or take a picture of me and you with your family, or whatever that looks like. So I think it's really cool. And again, I also Googled Flat Teacher science ideas, Flat Teacher math ideas, Flat Teacher music ideas. So certainly whatever your content is, definitely something you should check out. I think it's a lot of fun. And this is a real authentic way to connect with a kid as well. So I think, how's my time? Okay, awesome. I want to go ahead and turn it back over to Liz, or help Liz join me. Before I do, Liz, is it time for me to say how to connect, or do we want to do questions and Q&A and talk a little bit about that?
Well, why don't you go ahead and let us know how to connect? And then there's a lot of questions and a lot of really interesting comments that they're not necessarily questions, but they're just things that piqued my interest anyway. So I wanted to share them. So why don't you, before we do that, tell everybody like what's coming up for you and where they can find you.
Awesome. Okay, so Silence Education is the company that I work with. And so I'm on Twitter, as Liz said, at Dr._Aquagirl. Totally random trivia, because all the time I get questions, why is your Twitter handle Aquagirl? My undergraduate degree is actually in marine biology. Random trivia. So that's like my little shout out, because besides talking to dolphins, I don't get to use my degree that much, right? So my a company Twitter handle is at silence_ed. And then there's my email address. Please reach out to me. I love, connecting with people. And then of course our Silence Education website. And then in terms of what I have coming up, I'm super excited, but in November, I am doing a conference on my book, and I've divided into two parts. So independently, you can do part one, or you can do part two, or you can do both if you want to come and see my happy face on camera for another 6 hours. And I also realized that, practice what you preach, this idea of being flexible. So there's some options there if you want to do 2 after school evening sessions, or just come join me on a Saturday. But definitely, I'd love to see some of y'all there. It's talking about newcomers and English learners and culture, my favorite things in the world. So hopefully you can join me for some of those.
We definitely have a lot of people joining us today who work with newcomers, so I know they'll be interested in that. So let me go ahead and steal screen control from
Absolutely.
you, so we can talk about what is coming up on the next Saddleback webinar. So coming up next week, we have the first in a 2-part series around English learners and disabilities. So many of you, when you register for our webinars, you can put down suggestions for webinars that you'd like to see. And this is one that has come up multiple times, especially if you have students who are new to the country, and how can you tell the difference between what is just the natural timeline of a student struggling to acquire language versus what constitutes a true disability, and how do you manage and navigate that. So we're going to tackle that with the next 2 webinars. Next week we have Dr. Lopez Murphy joining us from the College of New Jersey, and she will be talking to us about bilingualism and disabilities, shedding light on the intersections. And then part 2 will be the following week. So please register for that on our website. And also you will receive an email prompting you to register, so you can wait for that as well. Now, on to some of these questions. Let me open up my chat box here, because oh my gosh, so many great comments and
No,
questions.
and
I
I'm
want
so
to be able to
excited,
get
and
to
I can't
all
even,
of them.
I'm seeing like, hi, Joseph. I'm seeing hi, Cheryl, like all these wonderful familiar faces, and that we've lost connections with, because we've been locked down in our house for all of these months.
I know. And these webinars are such a great opportunity for all of us to connect and at least communicate with each other, given the situation. So it's really nice to see a lot of the same people joining us week after week too. So
Yes.
there are so many great questions and comments. So I'm just going to kind of begin with some notes that I was jotting down earlier. Somebody had mentioned, and I thought this was interesting, that really the students are learning 2 languages. They're trying to learn English, but they're also trying to become fluent with the technology. So we have to look at this as not only are they learning English, but they're learning tech as well. And so this presents sort of a double challenge. And I really like that comment, and there was no question associated with it. I just wanted to put it out there because I think it dovetails nicely with the points you were making around communicating and understanding where everybody is, and trying to dial in on those needs so that you can kind of customize. And I wanted to give you a moment to kind of address that if you had any thoughts on this. Well, tech is really another kind of language that our students are, that's an overlay to their, to their English that they're trying to learn as well.
Well, and I think it's kind of a two-part answer, because if you think about, I'm learning rigorous content in a language that I don't necessarily understand yet, and I'm learning the technology piece. That's overwhelming. I can't wrap my mind around having to do that. So I think that some of these low-tech options, even if the kid has access to the technology, we might want to consider just to lower that affective filter and lower that anxiety level. So yeah, Boo, I know you can get on Zoom, but if you don't want to and you'd rather engage through the lesson this way. So that's why I think also the choice should be there, because let's just think about all kids. I know I'm zoomed out, right? How many of our kids are just zoomed out? So letting them take that mental break from the computer and giving them some alternatives. So I don't think it's just for kids who don't have the technology, but for that very reason alone. If I can manage the content, let me just deal with that right now. Let me process the content, and let me get good, or at least semi-proficient at this one piece before I have to add another layer and access the technology as well. So I think that's something really to think about, that just totally emphasizes again the need to be flexible and providing options. You know what, if you want to take it all on, God bless you, go for it, but giving kids the option to opt out of some of the technology, I think, is what's important.
And there was also someone who noted that this particular teacher is in a one-to-one situation. So everybody has, I don't know, a Chromebook or
Right.
some device. And yet there is some reluctance with the family. Parents are tech reluctant. So there's that as well. They may have the technology, but for whatever reason, for family reasons or whatever, fill in the blank, there's just not a comfort level. And it could be that it's new and it's unfamiliar, or it could be maybe there's a strong stance. I don't want my kid on a screen all day. Like who knows? So even if they do have the equipment to get online, you still may need some of these alternatives to be able to build that trust with the families and sort of ease them into it. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, and I think to quote my own book, it's so many things when we talk about cultural proficiency. You know, problems arise when I try to make sense of your reality through my lens, you know, and I think we don't have a clue why those parents are opting out. And we could speculate, but that seems like a really useless waste of energy. There's so many reasons, and there's so much research out there. Back to the comment about, you know, whether or not students should be required to have their cameras on. I don't know why they don't want to have their cameras on, and frankly, it's not. I can't even fathom it. I don't know why there's a apprehension for technology. All I know is, as an educator, I want to be as highly effective as I can and as highly responsive as I can to my children and their families' needs. So again, offering those options. Even if you have the technology, it's not my place to say, well, you have it, we'll get on. You know, I don't think we go there. I think we just provide lots of love, lots of support, reach out, make those families as comfortable as they need. Ask them, is there anything I can do to help you with the technology? Open that door, and if they walk through it, they walk through it. That's wonderful and amazing. We celebrate. But if they're reluctant to walk through it, then we provide some alternatives, because at the end of the day, I still got to teach that baby. He's still my baby. Does that make
Thank
sense?
you.
Or am I
Yeah.
getting preachy?
No, I
I
mean,
don't care. I am.
thank you for addressing that, because I think that is a reality, that
It is.
just because the equipment is out there, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be thinking about providing some alternatives as well. Hi, Barbara in Austin ISD. I see you. We are going to get you that information on Saddleback Digital that you want. And I see your question, so I'm going to ask Michelle right now. What are your thoughts about having newcomer students access content via online translation tools?
Translation tools, like any technology, is great, but it doesn't replace a human being. And I talk about this all the time when I do my newcomer training, regardless if we're virtual or regardless if we're face-to-face. I think the translation tool is a wonderful tool to increase comprehensible input as a sort of a front-loading opportunity, as an opportunity to preview content. But I'm, as the teacher, ultimately still going to make sure I'm doing my best job making sure they understand content. So I always tell teachers, use all these technology translation devices, but only as an extra tool, because at the end of the day, it's still going to be the teacher, me, responsible for making sure kids understand the content. So I think they're wonderful tools to preview content or review content, but only as a piece. So that third piece over here, whether it's preview, review, that third piece is me, the teacher, doing the teaching of the content. Does that make sense? So great tools to preview, review, but doesn't replace the teacher.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Is the book, I'm assuming it's your book, Pathways to Greatness, suitable for working with adults?
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, it has a little bit of a secondary lens because there are secondary students, because there are certain sections in the book that would not be relevant to adult learners or to elementary, middle school, like transcript evaluation and scheduling. Those are some unique challenges that only high school folks would face, but absolutely. Cultural connections. You know, honestly, Liz, I had a school one time book me for training and buy the book, and I was like, wait a second, you don't really have any newcomers. And he's like, no, we're just going to use this for like regular strategies, because I think that especially the chapter on culture, I mean, we could all use a little cultural proficiency training, right? And just this idea, making content comprehensible. I think we often forget that most of us listening are, you know, we work with English learners, but I often make the argument our science content sounds like a foreign language to our native English speakers. Academic English is certainly a second language, and the same thing with adult learners. So I absolutely think the book is appropriate for all age, all grade levels. So thank you, whoever asked that amazing question.
Another question about the books, and this actually goes to Nancy's book, and actually your book as well. We have several people joining us from Canada, and you may not know the answer to this, I don't know. Are they available in Canada? Can they be shipped to Canada? People who are in Canada and interested in getting their hands on these books, is there a quick and easy way to do that?
First of all, I love Canadians. I love you, Canada. Hi, Canada. Second of all, I think the answer is yes. If I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on this, but certainly if they want to email me so I can reach out to them individually. I do believe that Michelle Bellinger, our person in our company that handles that, I do believe we have a printer in Canada. I'm not sure about that. I know there's a way to get the resources. I just don't know exactly what that is at this particular moment, but certainly that's something I can follow up on.
Great. We had a question about choice boards. Can you tell us a little bit more about the choice board or choice boards in general, or the choice board around the flat teacher activity that you shared?
Sure. So, you know, choice boards are essentially, let me go back a little bit. Let me see if I can show you. I know you're sharing, Liz. Are you still sharing?
I'm going to stop so you can, oh, and we actually had a request to stop sharing the screen. I see your request. Okay. That's a good point. People want to be able to see our faces.
Yay. By the way, I love you too, Sarah Potter. So can I just share this really quick so you can see this picture? One second. Can y'all see that?
I see your screen that says other ideas.
Okay, so this is the choice board for the English class in a jar, and essentially what it is, it's just this document with these squares on it, and it's different options. So for this particular option, as I said here, you can't really tell, but one of them is roll the dice poetry. One is a deep dive with a TED Talk, and her instructions were pick one of these every 3 days or whatever and complete the task. So it's almost just like a list, an inventory of ideas that kids can select from. And then the flat teacher choice board had things like, I know you can't see it, it says, you know how much I love reading, so take a picture of you reading a book to me. And this one says, I love to go on a walk with you, so take a picture of the two of us on a walk. So it just gives kids choices and options and ideas. And I know several teachers said you don't have to pick one of these on my choice board, but come up with your own. And I love the Google machine, right? I try not to think of anything on my own if there's somebody's already thought about it, but just this idea of Googling choice boards for science, choice boards for outdoor science activities. I Googled all of that and I got multiple hits. So I think it's definitely worth a quick Google search, whatever content area you teach or grade level. And can I just say something really quick? I know there's a lot of probably secondary teachers that are like, oh my gosh, that's not going to work. But y'all, I taught secondary, I taught high school. I used to give my kids stickers and they act like they don't want stickers. But then you get the big burly football player that's like, oh, miss, you didn't give me my sticker. So yeah, it might be kind of silly, but I think even our older, they're still kids, right? They're still babies. And I think some of the things we do at elementary that we think would be cheesy for high school kids, now they might roll their eyes at you, but I don't know. I think it would be interesting. I'd love for a secondary teacher to try the flat teacher activity and then let me know how it works out. I think that would be interesting to hear about.
I actually think that probably would go pretty well because it's fun. I don't know, it's
It
fun, and they can get
is.
silly with it. So last question before we wrap up has to do with assessment. A lot of people want to know how we can track progress, how we can measure growth, how we can ensure that progress is being made, whether it's through tech options, low tech options. Any ideas for that are either low tech or no tech in terms of keeping tabs on how students are progressing in terms of content and academics and English acquisition?
100% yes. And Liz, I feel like this might be another webinar, hint, hint.
Oh yeah.
No, I believe this is my point that I made at the beginning of our time together. I think this is where we revisit what we were already doing effectively in class. So my answer to that question, another question would be, what were some ways you were authentically assessing your L's, especially your newcomers, before we went remote learning? So we think about portfolios and checklists and all of those real authentic embedded opportunities to assess knowledge. Those are absolutely applicable right now. And none of those necessarily relied on the technology. So I think we also, just like redefining a definition of participation, I think we might need to reevaluate, why are we assessing? And I talk about this in my training. Are we assessing to get a grade, or are we assessing to really determine the level of content knowledge attainment? Because the answer to that question is going to determine what your test looks like. So I just think maybe something else that just really, yesterday I had this conversation. I think we need to sort of check ourselves and not get overwhelmed, especially now with being remote learning, the end of the year and where kids are going to be at the end of the year, and these state assessments and whether or not we're going to have state assessments and what does the federal government say about it. I think we just get so consumed with that we lose sight of, okay, right now that's the end of the year and that's super important, but right now we've got these kids in front of us virtually or in face-to-face. So how can we authentically assess them now where they're at? So it's not going to look like it does at the end of the year. You know what, for that matter, it's not going to look like it looks in 2 months. As the children's language acquisition progresses, as you said, Liz, as their skill set for accessing technology progresses, I think the assessments change. So those assessments are going to evolve, but they need to be really authentic. So look up portfolios, look up these checklists. And again, I know it sounds like I'm plugging my book, but there's a whole section about authentic assessment options for specifically newcomers who can't take that paper, pencil, Scantron test yet for appropriateness.
I actually think this would be a topic. This would be a great webinar topic. If this is a webinar that you all want to see, assessing English learners during remote instruction, in the chat, give me a yes or a no, a Y or an N, and we'll do a quick little assessment here to see if that's something.
Let's do an authentic assessment, Liz. Let's do an authentic.
We'll get on that. I will actually call you as soon as we end this webinar. So
let me check my schedule. I'm open. Look at that.
Excellent. Well, one more question that came in here. Okay, Darla says yes, she definitely wants to see that. Before we close out, I just want to make sure. Oh, webinar recording. Yes. So the recording to the webinar will be sent out tomorrow. And also, please check out our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are on our YouTube channel, Saddleback Educational Publishing, and please subscribe. You'll definitely get all the webinar content you need there. So before we close out today, let me go back and do a screen share for you so you can see our social media information. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us today. I look forward to having you back on.
I didn't even pay attention to how many people we had today, but thank y'all for taking time out of y'all day and listen to me talk. I appreciate it very much, the opportunity.
I think they definitely got a lot out of it. I was monitoring the chat the whole time, and a lot of positive feedback, and I'm sure a lot of people will be catching the webinar recording as well. You Excellent. Can find Saddleback on, we're everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube. As I said, please check out our YouTube channel and subscribe so you can see every time that a new webinar video is added. And we just love that you take time out of your day to join us. And we hope we will see you next week for part 1 of our 2-part series on English learners with disabilities. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.